Hello everybody, my name's Nemo and welcome back to another Magic video. Today we're taking a look at Masks of the Dimir. So this is somewhat of a control deck. It has some tempo elements, but mostly control. And I'm running 26 lands here because I want to be able to play my 6 drops and 7 drops. I've got quite a few of those. So 26 lands seems to work out well for this deck. We're not running Scour, we're not running Surveying Sprite, we're not running Ravenous Rats. And I think the fact that we're not running cards like these, which are pretty decent. I mean, if anything, these Scours and the Surveying Sprites just cycle, so they're usually not, they can't be bad at all. But and Ravenous Rat sometimes, does something pretty good. And the fact that I'm not running these cards, I think, says something about the this format that we're playing in. I think there are a lot more good cards. Compared to the earlier Duels the Planeswalkers. It doesn't say that the decks are better, but it's easier to make a 60 card deck with all of those 60 cards being actual good playable cards. So we don't need cards like Scour and Surveying Sprite because of that reason that we're not that desperate to throw in cards that basically cycle because there's nothing else good to throw in. But also, this has no purpose other than cycling itself, and I'd rather just, sometimes I don't have the 1 mana extra left over to cast it. And Surveying Sprite, when I found myself playing it, most of the time I was just like chump blocking with it just to draw an extra land. So I'd rather just run some extra lands instead of the Surveying Sprites. That's my thought process there. Ravenous Rats can be pretty amazing, but there's other discard in this deck. And I think I'd rather run that because there's a bigger chance of actually getting something useful out of it. And the 1/1 body isn't that relevant. So, Treasure Hunt I don't think is that great simply because every time I play it, just every time, all I get is just 1 extra card. And the chance of it doing more than that isn't that great. And when you only get 1 card out of it, it's better to have Scour. And I'm already not running that. Hands of Binding, I think Sleep is just better. In this deck, because I don't have a lot of really big creatures. I'm just usually clumping up the board with a bunch of small ones. So, Hands of Binding doesn't let all my dudes get through. Mostly it just lets like 1 guy through, mostly a flyer. And I'm not even running that many flyers anyways, so I don't think it fits this deck as well as Sleep does. So I'm definitely running Dimir Guildmage here. He's easy to cast, being hybrid mana, and he's a 2/2. And he has some really nice abilities that can allow you to steal away the game in the late game when you're both top decking. Counter Squall is a very nice card. It just, it's almost always useful, and most of the time when it is useful, it's incredible. So, very, very good card. Last Gasp, it's pretty good removal. It's gonna kill pretty much anything that is gonna be dropped in the early game. So, it's one of the better removal spells this deck has, so you definitely want to run those. Chittering Rats is just an amazing way of getting card advantage here. You get a 2/2 and the opponent basically, is 1 card later in their deck, and they lose out on their next draw step, basically, is what it does. And the fact that, they're 1 card behind every turn from the moment you've played this is really, really good. Because if you think about it, how many games do you play where you're like, well, I can win this if I draw this card, but you need to draw it this turn. And, if you've played Chittering Rats on the opponent, then whatever card they need is going to be 1 card deeper in their deck. And that effect is just really, really good. So, yeah, really nice. We've got 1 copy of Threads of Disloyalty. When this does something, it's usually quite good. Getting their Champion of the Parish or something like that, or even like a 2-drop in Guardians of Light that they've enchanted, just really nice. So it's really good when it does work, but when it doesn't do anything, it doesn't do anything. So I'm running 1 of them just as a one-off. We've got Consult the Necrosages here. And this is just a great card. You either get to, get rid of their last 2 cards, or you get to draw cards if you need to. And most of the time, like, if they only have like 2 cards in their hand, then, you're probably discarding them. But other than that, most of the time what you do is dependent on the board state. If if you're behind on the board state and you don't really have the right cards to deal with what's going on, then you want to be drawing cards. But if you're not that threatened, then the discard is probably going to be more useful to you. But either way, it's a very good card. Time Ebb, again, that same effect that Chittering Rats has, where they're one card, less deep in their deck. For the rest of the game is just really nice, and yeah, it's not card disadvantage because they lose out on the draw step. They do get the dude back though, but yeah, very nice. I mean, it's basically a little bit of more expensive unsummon with an upside, so I'm happy there. Divination, draw 2 cards is nice for a control deck, obviously. Mind Rot, I think this is good enough, and this is basically, them discarding 1 card doesn't always do something with Ravenous Rats, but Mind Rot, most of the time they don't have 2 cards that they'd like to discard that they don't really care about, so 2 cards is pretty good. Slate Street Ruffian is, I don't think this is constructed playable at all. This is like a sealed card, or yeah, mostly sealed, I guess. I mean, in draft you can probably pick something better to get into your deck, but so this is mostly just a sealed deck to fill up your slots, and it's just not that good. So yeah, we run 1 copy of that. We've talked about that. Evil Twin is clone with upside, and clone is amazing, and this card's upside is amazing, so can't imagine not running Evil Twin. Doomsday Spectre is good enough for me. A 2/3 flyer can sometimes be pretty relevant. The fact that you can return something to your hand is mostly a good thing, because you can replay Shadowborn Demon, you can replay Evil Twin, you can replay Chittering Rats, etc. There's a lot of stuff with common to play abilities that you can abuse when you've played Doomsday Spectre. So it's mostly an upside that you get to return something to your hand, and yeah, it does something when it deals combat damage to a player. A lot of the times when this guy does attack in, they've got something that they don't care about discarding, or they just have no cards in hand or something. So, that doesn't always help, but the fact that it's a flyer and you get to pick something up and reuse the card's ability, is good enough for me, so I like the card. Archaeomancer, get back the last gasp that you need, get back, Divination or whatever. It's just a really nice card, so yeah, 2 of those. Mark of the Vampire, this deck isn't that great at dealing with overwhelming aggression, so having something, having an aura that can give your dude lifelink as well as make it a little bit bigger can be really nice in dealing with that. So we've got the single copy of Sleep, because sometimes this card can steal away a game, sometimes it doesn't do anything, so we've got a single copy there. We're not running Moroi. I just don't really like this card. I've tested it. I'm not just not running cards because I dislike them, but I do test the cards, and I never really got that much out of this card. Maybe it's my playstyle or whatever. But yeah, it's a big blocker is what I look at it as, and most of the time you don't really care about having a 4/4 flyer attacking. So having a big blocker is mostly what this does, and I'd rather just have some removal or some way of disrupting my opponent's plan than that, especially since this costs you a life per turn, and there's a lot of potential, especially against the more aggressive decks, of you being at 5 life by the time you stabilize, so you don't want to be stabilizing with Moroi. So I don't like these that much, and if someone plays pacifism on you, just not that happy, right? Reigns of Power, another card that maybe just doesn't fit my playstyle or whatever, but I tested this card. I tested it extensively in this deck, extensively in Dodge and Burn. It doesn't do that much for me. Most of the time I'm not that unlucky that I have absolutely no board state at all. But when I top deck this, so I'll usually have something on the board and this isn't going to be able to kill them. So, meh. Lobotomy is... it's too expensive. If this was 3 mana, I'd happily run it. But for 4 mana, I think it's a little bit late and too expensive to just get rid of 1 card in their hand. Even though you get to choose what it is, and if they have another copy of that same card, then it could be nice, of course. But yeah, I don't know. Most of the time, by 4 mana, especially against the aggro decks, I'm behind on the board state and need to deal with that and not play lobotomy. Mental Vapor is basically the same story here. So we're running Gas Lord of Foog because it's a 4/4 unblockable, and when it attacks then it gets to do something when it hits the opponent. That's nice, but it's a 4/4 unblockable, so you're on this guy. Because you clog up the board a lot and you get in the board stalls, and a 4/4 unblockable is really nice there. Shadowborn Demon is, I think, not as good in this deck as it is in Lords of Darkness, but it's still a really great card, and you know, it's basically unconditional removal. Of course, if you're playing against the Lords of Darkness, then I guess it's not unconditional, because hey, they've got a lot of demons, I hear. But anyways, it's still mostly unconditional removal, which is quite nice, and you get a blocker for a turn, and sometimes, you know, you just sack something else and then you get in for 5 or whatever, depending on the board state. So there's some options there, and you can like sack something else on upkeep and then return it with Doomsday Spectre, so you can replay it at a later time. So yeah, there's some use, there's some combos with the card in this deck, but just not as many combos as in Lords of Darkness, I think. But still, yeah, great card. Dire Undercurrents works pretty well for this deck. It's one of those cards that at first look I'm not that happy seeing, because it's you know, it's a 5-mana enchantment that doesn't do anything the turn it hits to play. But once it's on the board, it can do a lot of things, and most of the time, those are pretty nice things that it does for me. And I got some pretty nice use out of this one in playtesting, so I like it. Followed Footsteps is, you know, it's an aura. There's also always the 2-for-1 possibility happening with it, but its upside is so big, I definitely want this card in there. Beacon of Unrest, get back your, I don't know, Shadowborn Demon to kill something again. Get back your Gas Lord so it can start killing them. Get back Evil Twin or something, I don't know. Just a lot of really nice stuff to get back in this deck, and of course you're sometimes discarding the opponent. Sometimes they drop a bomb in the graveyard that you can get with Beacon of Unrest, so that's nice. And Dinrova Horror is also great to get back, by the way. Yeah, I like Beacon of Unrest there. We're not running Fool's Demise because, I don't know, most of my creatures aren't that threatening on the board, and the opponent doesn't really absolutely have to deal with them. Most of my creatures I run because of the enter the battlefield effect, which is, you know, at least that's the case for most of the creatures here. I mean, there's always exceptions, but yeah, so the opponent doesn't necessarily have to kill my creature, and I don't know. If they kill it in response to you playing this, then you're not that happy as well. And I mean, you want them to have the removal card, right, if you're playing Fool's Demise, so whatever. Illusionary, yeah, I pronounced it correctly. I thought I was going to say illusory, but it's Illusionary Armor. This just isn't that great. This is not an aggressive deck. +4/+4, no extra abilities, already isn't that great. And for 5 mana, I mean, and then, you know, it gets sacrificed when it becomes the target of a spell or ability, so they can still burn your dude. So, why are the 4 of these in the deck? We're not running Painful Quandary. I find it the worst. Well, I mean, this is the worst. But other than that, Painful Quandary, I find not as good as these, although it is kind of close with Dire Undercurrents. But yeah, I don't want to run too many 5-drops and 6-drops, so that's why it's not in the deck. But it's a decent card. It's pretty good. So we're running Dinrova Horror because this, you know, makes them return something to their hands. Discard, you know, this is great tempo play, and if they've got nothing in hand, which is often the case because they're worried about Chittering Rats, then this is even better. So pretty good card there. Yeah, definitely worth the 6-man. Necropolis Regent is just a game winner. Yes, it requires 3 black mana symbols there. Most of the time, if you know, by the time I get to the late game, I'll have the free swamps to be able to play this, and this is just such a good card. You just want it in the deck. Spinal Embrace, you know, the fact that you gain the life as well as getting their dude for a combat step is just insane. And yeah, you can play this during your turn. You just have to like pass through the combat phase, then play it before you're in the attack phase, basically. So you have to kind of, you know when to play this during your turn if you want to be attacking with their dude. But yeah, just because it says only during combat doesn't mean you can't attack with whatever you're grabbing. And otherwise it can, grab their best thing, block their second best thing, gain the life of the best thing dying, the second best thing dies. It's really good. Stolen Identity can definitely steal a game away, even if you never get the cipher, get the ability to trigger again because you don't get in. You've still stolen their best thing, and that's really, really nice. You've copied the best thing on the board. That's really, really nice. Fordoken Dismisser, just not as good as the other 6 drops. Same story here. Same story here. This card is just not good enough for 7 mana, and I don't even really want to be playing 7 mana spells. Colossal Whale is quite nice, but again, I'm not really into the 7 mana here. I think 6 mana is pretty expensive already, so Diluvian Primordial can definitely be great. Again, I don't want to be running 7 mana spells. Hollowborn Barghest is, I don't know, I don't think it's that great really, but whatever. Again, don't want to run 7 mana spells. Commandeer can be really nice, and I did play with it, and some matchups you're really happy to have Commandeer, and even in those matchups though, sometimes you don't have 2 other blue spells in hand, so that can certainly be an issue. And I mean, drawing this early, it's usually gonna have a use. Drawing it late, unless you've got the 7 mana, of course, then not that great. And we've got a 2 mana spell that does that, and usually you can afford to keep 2 mana open. So, well, it doesn't steal their spell, but still. Mind Leech Mass is, I don't know, it's 8 mana. Who cares? But usually they're not even gonna have something in their hand. Like if you're at 8 mana, why didn't they just play their spell? For Avatar of Will, this can be cast for cheap, but most of the time, by the time the opponent is out of cards, it's like late enough that it's not that big of a deal getting a 5/6 on the board. So for 2 mana. So that's the deck, that's the build, that's what I'm running with, and we're gonna get into a game in the next video. Hope you guys enjoyed this one. My name's been Nemo, my name will still be Nemo next time. Thanks for watching, see you then.